So it's good to have you back.
I don't know what to say.
I don't require much.
I'm so ashamed. You redeemed me and I just threw it all away.
Well, that's not much of a redemption if it can be lost in a day, is it?
Not much of a redemption if it could be lost in a day. Did Jesus in fact redeem Mary? If that's the case, how could Mary's behaviors have been the way they were prior to this? So the true question is, does Jesus actually redeem, or is it in fact something else that we're missing entirely? Welcome back to another episode of Through the Lens with your favorite trauma coach, Ashley. Strap yourself in. Today we are going on another trip with The Chosen, Season 2, kind of episodes 5 and 6. This was from episode 6. And we are going to dive in. We are going to dive into the belief that something outside of us or someone must be our redeemer, and that if we are redeemed, then we must be perfect at all times or we are not worthy. And then if in fact we find our way back into the ego or into areas of mistake, are we still worthy? I'm so excited for today. Make sure to like, subscribe, turn on notifications, and let's dive in. Okay, so a little backstory if you haven't seen this. Season 2, episode 5, Mary, who, mind you, when Jesus found her, demons inhabited her at points, and she would just be awful and crazy and mean to people, and she would have these bouts. And when Jesus found her, he was able to help release those from her, release the weight. And the way in which he did that was he spoke her name, the name in which God gave her, her true name, which is Mary. Otherwise, she was called to by Lilith prior to that. And in that moment, it was like this weight was released, or what the show depicts is the demons left her. He casted them out. And it was her really realizing that. Then she begins to follow Jesus, and she's just always in this beautiful place of spirit, and you can feel it from her. And then we see in episode 5, at the beginning of the episode, we start to see that shift. We start to see that she has chosen at the level of the mind to begin to enter back into that ego belief system, to stray away from spirit. And how we see that at the beginning is that the Romans begin to trigger memories within her. And remember, that's a key giveaway that we are in the ego belief system, is when we are being robbed of the present moment. And how does the ego do that best? It takes our memories and uses them to create fear of predictions of the future, which robs us of the present moment. And that's what begins to happen to Mary. And it happens a couple of times. So it's almost like it's chiseling away at, in fact, was she redeemed by Jesus? And she believed it. She believed that Jesus was the one who saved her, the one who completely released the demons from her, instead of maybe it was her. Maybe it was her willingness and her ability to shift at the level of the mind. And that's what we're going to talk about here, is that she's in this place of entering back into the ego, and then all of a sudden, this man who is filled with the demons himself, or that's what's represented in the movie or in the show, he comes and the demons recognize her. Now she goes by the name Mary, and he says Lilith, or the demons do, and they see her. And this fully brings her back to identify with the body. Mind you, since that moment with Jesus, what he was is he didn't save her. He didn't redeem her. He was a mirror of her truth, of that she is not a body. She is not Lilith. She is in fact spirit. And the way it was represented in The Chosen is that it's Mary. Mary is the spirit piece of you, and Lilith is the body. Well, by this guy saying Lilith and her have already been chiseled away by the Romans, She goes back to identifying with the body. She goes by identifying with the one that sins and sacrifice and separation, or that she believes does. So she's back in that belief system. And of course, immediately she's like, I'm unworthy of being here, because she's no longer realizing that she is spirit and that she is one. And that is something that we do constantly, friends. It's like we are beating our own head against the wall, constantly believing that we must sacrifice and experience this separation because we're unworthy. But the problem is there's like a disconnect between us realizing that it is our choice of this at the level of the mind that is causing this pain and suffering at the level of form, at the effect. So what does she do? Of course, the effect mirrors what the choice is she's making in her mind. She immediately sets out and must separate from spirit. If we're seeing this as a representation of the much larger picture, which is the group of the followers that are following Jesus represents spirit. And she's no longer in spirit. She's no longer making the choice at the level of the mind to allow herself to be in spirit. Instead, she's choosing the ego, which doesn't allow for spirit to come forward. So she goes into town. And we see as she goes into town that she even goes into the underworld, the darkness, and the darkness is depicted by drinking and gambling. And of course, her being a female in this time should not be in that place. So it even exasperates the remembrance that she's in the ego fully. She is all in. And she goes down and she's gambling with the men and playing knuckle bucks or something like that and attempting to get her money back. And you see the character shift and her physical appearance starts to represent what choice she's making at the level of the mind, which is that of the ego. So how often have you found yourself doing that, where all of a sudden you start to feel that you're in this place of spirit and that you are the dreamer of the dream, and then you get pulled back because of a remembrance of past shame and guilt and a reminder that, nope, you're a body, you're a sinner, you're bad. And then your actions begin to mirror that because of your lack of worthiness within, because you've been pulled back into the ego belief system. That's what happened to Mary here, that she's acting out exactly the narrative that she has chosen at the level of the mind. And a key piece that occurred before Mary actually went to town, was when she was interacting with this man who was filled with the demons and he called her Lilith. She attempted to do what Jesus did for her. But the problem is she was focused on what that looked like at the level of form, which it looked like Jesus making her say her own name and calling out her name. So she attempts to do that. But the problem is she's coming from a place of fear. She's coming from the ego. She's coming from attack. And so that's what she gets back. The thing she missed there is Jesus was coming from spirit. So he was able to be that mirror for Mary to remind her so she could choose at the level of the mind again. He paired with her at the level of the mind, and therefore was able to help walk her through not choosing the ego anymore and allowing her truest self to come through, which is that of spirit. But again, that didn't happen. So she didn't feel worthy. It's just this narrative of not feeling worthy. And she felt like, oh my gosh, I will never be like Jesus. I will never be like these people who are able to impact others and heal others because they are followers of Jesus. That's just not me. I'm not worthy of that, which is the ego's tactics all the time. Anytime you find yourself believing, oh, I'm unworthy, or really in that place of, let's be honest, the victim, take a step back, because you are the one that chose to be there. I know you're like, oh, Ashley, that burns. But it's true. You chose at the level of the mind, and you can choose different. That's the coolest piece. We see that. Okay, she's there, and then Simon and Matthew are tasked by Jesus to go back into town and find her, which they do. And when we find her, she's definitely a representation of someone who has shifted from spirit to, I am fully a body that is experiencing sacrifice, separation, and pain. She's even vomiting. She's hungover from drinking, and she just feels awful, and she doesn't want to go back. But they eventually convinced her to go back by meeting her, not forcing her, but instead sharing with her about how they have some of the same feelings of unworthiness and that they push through them and that she is worthy, because if they are worthy, she is worthy as well. So then we end up at the place that we started this, and that's when she finds her way back and she goes and confronts Jesus in the tent. Well, not confronts, she meets up with Jesus in the tent, and she's like, I'm unworthy of being here. Like, you redeemed me, and then I went and did this. How awful. And we start back at like we did at the beginning, where he says, well, that's a pretty short redemption then if you already went back out. And what I hear him saying is, I can't redeem you. Only you can do that. Only you have the choice to do that. And Mary continues to sit in this place of the ego of, I'm unworthy of this, and I am the victim. And we love that. We love to be unworthy, because it gives us this sense of reiteration of that narrative that we have already chosen within. But instead, Jesus doesn't have it. Instead, he acknowledges, yeah, you got pulled back into the ego. Okay, what are you going to do about it? And he really just stands as this mirror. He doesn't feed in to her victim mentality, but he also doesn't try to make her believe that he is saving her. Instead, he just holds there and is this mirror for her to have this aha moment of, oh my gosh, it's my choices. It's been my choices this entire time. It's been my ability to choose the representation and identifying with the ego and that I'm a body, or identifying with spirit and that I am so much more. And in that moment, she shifts that, and she's able to. And Jesus ends up saying, I forgive you. But really, it was a mirror of her forgiving herself. And that's really when she breaks down. And when we really see that she is fully embodying that, wow, this is my choice. This is nothing to do with Jesus redeeming me, and has everything to do with the redemption of myself at the level of the mind. And this realization that I've done it to myself this entire time, but only by her being able to have that direct correlation of being in this place of spirit, like so strong spirit, surrounded by spirit, and then immediately going to the opposite side into the ego, like literally the depths of the darkness of the town where all the shame and guilt lingers, and then finding her way back and not being judged. Was she able to actually have that bird's eye view of, oh, the correlation of choice? I chose this. I chose to go back to the ego. I chose not to stay in spirit. I chose the ego. Mary thought that Jesus was the solution. And that's what the weight she placed on him being the solution and him being her redeemer is actually what brought her back to the place of the ego, because there was so much weight placed on Jesus. And in the moment that the Romans came and they began to remind her, and then the guy that was filled with the demons and him saying Lilith, and Jesus, the body, not being there in that moment, she went back to the ego, because she had placed so much weight on the decision that her redemption was outside of herself. And we do that so often. We place our salvation, our redemption in people, in ideas, all these different things that in the end we get caught up because we don't realize that it's actually our choice within, and our redemption is actually within when we make the choice to choose spirit over ego, to choose love over fear, and to really be guided by that internal voice, which is God or the Holy Spirit. But we miss it so often. Instead, we would rather project it out and externalize it. And really, that's a conversation for another day, but that's what we did with Jesus. Jesus, the body. But Jesus, the symbol, is the mirror to you that you are your redeemer, not Jesus, but you, your ability to choose to follow Jesus, right? That's the key piece here. That's the key of this entire conversation it's your ability to choose spirit over ego. And when you choose spirit, you choose to follow the path that Jesus has already laid ahead. He's your big brother. He's already done it. And that's what he's here to do, is to guide you. But you first have to make the choice. And that's what Mary was able to see. Jesus didn't force her anything. He didn't do anything to her. Instead, it was all her choice. And we saw how quickly she could choose different. So then she was able to choose different again. Oh, another episode of The Chosen. I love it so much. And it's in the theaters right now. I wonder if any of you have gone to see season 4. If you have, comment below. Let me know what your thoughts are. But remember, friend, that nothing outside of you is going to redeem you. It is your choice of who you choose to follow, what script you choose to view. Is it the Holy Spirit or the ego? And it's radical self-ownership. Come on, it's time to own the truth that has been there this entire time. We just have had smoke and mirrors in the way. That was today's episode of Through the Lens with The Chosen. I hope you had an absolutely amazing trip. As always, comment below. What other things would you like to see? And what are your thoughts about that Jesus, in fact, is not the Redeemer, but instead it was Mary's ability to choose who she wanted to follow? Make sure to like, subscribe, turn on notifications. As always, remember you are worth it. So much love. Bye-bye.